Hello and welcome back to RamsTalkPodcast. John Eustace is 3 days, completed 3 days of the most important training week of his Derby County career so far and maybe ever. There's been a lot of things happening off the pitch, which gives us lots to talk about tonight. If you are joining and you want to comment, if you want to give us your opinion, then be sure to do so on X or YouTube. But tonight I'm joined by, firstly, Craig Nash. Craig, how are you?
Yeah, good mate. Nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Craig. And you did step in for us last week with another podcast. We do really appreciate that. We've built a really good community up, and we've got people that we can rely on when we're all busy with our working lives. So thanks for doing that. We're also joined by James Walker as well. James, how you doing?
Evening, yeah. Starting to be more positive, I hope.
Hopefully, yeah. Fingers crossed. We'll have to see how we get on Saturday, but yeah, things are. Yeah. It can only go up from Friday night, of course, can't it? So we'll have to see. The guys on the podcast use the Mick McCarthy saying of it can't get a lot worse. I think it can. I generally don't think it can get worse, but we'll see what happens. Craig, obviously we heard the news earlier in the week. It's not really a surprise, is it, that Warrington and Hamshaw have decided to move on? What was your initial reaction to that when you saw that news?
I think it's probably the right call. All that they're good guys, right? But I think we heard the word clean break used a lot on radio and in the club putting those words out there, and I think that is the right phrase for that. So Eustace can start from fresh. The players are getting new ideas. There's no conflicting information coming in. There were similar discussions, wasn't there, when Warren took over from senior and people were saying, could he have stayed on as an assistant? But I think John Eustace has to have his own ideas and not feel like he's being undermined by anything. So yeah, sad to see him go because they're nice blokes, but hopefully that just means there's better energy coming into the club.
Yeah, James, I guess it's a surprise for some people that they did see a game under Eustace, obviously at QPR. Was it a surprise in terms of, we talked about timing in terms of Warren leaving and also with these two leaving as well. It was a bit strange that they got that particular game, do you not think?
I think all of the timings around all of it was strange. I'm sure we'll come on to it later, kind of with the Paul Warren stuff and the Pearce interview and all that kind of thing that's gone on since Warren left the club. It was a little bit odd in the fact that they've been given a chance to continue working with the same group of players whilst Eustace has been there. Equally, I can kind of see it from the other point of view in the sense of, well, we need a coach and we need a goalkeeping coach, and to not have one and just basically pummel it out to the under-23s coaches in Jake Buxton or whomever that might be is probably not good in terms of workload for those coaches and those people. Because we've still got an academy that's trying to recover from what has happened in our past, and that is slowly healing. So I don't know. There's kind of 6 of one and half dozen of the other in terms of both of those arguments. It's a little bit strange, but I think it was a symptom of where we've come from, and I could see that if we were going to sack another manager or get in future, I don't see it happening on a regular basis where we have Steve Round and who's the goalkeeping coach that's come in?
Paul Clements.
That was it, Paul Clements. I don't see them sticking around again, if that makes sense. If we do have another change in regime any point in the future, I don't see it being a repeat, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I guess with Paul Warren and this kind of squad, they were so tightly knit, weren't they? They were kind of a gang, really, and Paul Warren was the face of that, and quite clearly they'll probably end up where Paul Warren ends up, and that's just going to be the case that they'll follow him around. And we have to wish them well. Those 2 points that we gained under Hamshaw potentially might be 2 points that keep us in the division. Craig, one thing that Hamshaw was renowned for in his time at Derby County, and especially this season, is the set pieces. We've seen the famous Ring of Roses and lots of different variations from corners. I think the goal that sticks out for me, of course, is Curtis Nelson's bullet header. What I'd give to go back to those times. But we're obviously missing a set piece coach. Do you think that has any bearing on the future, or is it a case of set piece coaches are overrated in your opinion? I'm thinking of the Arsenal set piece coach that stands on the touchline when they get a corner.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember the last time we did score a goal from a set piece. So things have definitely started to dry up in that sense anyway. So whatever we were doing, again, had teams started to figure that out. That might be something that is going to be put in place in the future. Eustace has brought his own staff in, hasn't he? And the appointment of Steve Round, I don't know if that feels to me like that is a club appointment and not a Eustace appointment. I think he would have had to agree to that. But so it could be something that the club are looking at. But I don't know. I mean, they're in the media at the moment, aren't they? Because Arsenal have got one, Liverpool got a throw-in coach. But you know, are they the sort of places where we need to be chucking money at? I don't know. Shay Given did a great job as goalkeeper coach, didn't he? I don't see why one of the other coaches can't bring that under their remit, to be fair.
Yeah, and I guess, James, at the moment, we don't really want to be scoring set-piece goals. We want to be scoring goals from open play, because that's a real problem that we're finding. We've obviously talked, and you've both talked about the replacements that have come in. They've both been confirmed today. We've got Stephen Clement coming in. When I first saw it, I thought it was Stephen Clement. I missed the S to begin with, and I got a little bit worried, if I'm honest, thinking, what does he know about goalkeepers? But yeah, Stephen Clement's obviously a fantastic coach. He's had a lot of experience at this level. It feels like a good appointment, in all honesty. And I think if you look at the appointments that we're making to replace Warne and his team, at the moment, it feels like an upgrade. What's your personal opinion, James?
Yeah, I think Round is not Round. I do think Paul Clements is an upgrade. I think, you know, he's had pedigree in the league. You know, he's been at Huddersfield Town. He was there for something like, I think it was like 7 to 8 years. He was there for a long time. He was the head goalkeeping coach in Wolverhampton's academy. He's got some pedigree kind of around this level. I think I did read that Steve Round was a temporary appointment, wasn't he, until the end of the season? So I think it's more of yes. I think you're probably right, Craig, and that is probably a club appointment rather than a Eustace appointment. Probably with a view to getting that changed in the summer with somebody of Eustace's choosing, most likely. I don't see it as a bad appointment, though. I mean, he's been at the club before. He knows his way around. I think overall they're pretty decent appointments, and I suppose time will tell if they're an upgrade on what we had. But kind of on paper, I would suggest they are probably upgrades. I mean, I think he was at, back to Paul Clements, he was at Huddersfield, or it might have even been Norwich, where he was under David Wagner. A very successful championship manager, as we know. So that can only stand him in good stead. I know he worked very closely with Angus Gunn at Norwich and players like that. So I think he can only serve to improve an already steady, not perfect finished article, Jakob Zetterstrom, but a solid option. I think he can improve him. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it'll be really interesting to see. Obviously, the title of this episode is what we should expect from a full week of training under Eustace. But what we'll see from a different change in the goalkeeping department. Obviously, Zetterstrom kind of under a bit of stick for the I guess the goals on Friday night. I think it was a bit harsh, in all honesty. Potentially could have done better with the second, but the first is an absolute worldie from Ilias Chair. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what Clements is able to install. Craig, we spoke briefly before we came on air about Steve Round. I mean, for me, that is a big signing. I know it's only a part-time appointment, but it feels like it's a big cog in a wheel that potentially could and should save us from the drop. I mean, you look at his CV in terms of where he's been. Obviously, like James said, he knows the club because he finished his playing career here, but he's been assistant manager at Arsenal. He's technical director, which is quite interesting, Aston Villa as well. So he's a footballing man. He's been around the sport for decades, and I'm sure there's lots that not just John Eustace will be tapping into, but as a club will be tapping into his expertise. What's your initial thoughts on seeing that?
I mean, it's exciting. It's definitely. I think it has to be an emotional. He's got to have some sort of an emotional pull to take that, and I think that might be one of the reasons why it's part-time for now. Whether that could become a full-time position long-term, who knows? It will probably be dependent on how he fits in with Eustace's coaching staff. If we stay up this season as well, you know, he was the assistant manager or something at Arsenal, wasn't he? As most recent as July 2023. So he's got some severe pedigree. I just think we can't expect too much because he's come on board in the last like 13 games. You know, he's not going to wave a magic wand. A lot of the time you hear phrases like back to basics when a new manager comes in, but I don't think we could have been any more basic in the way that we were playing football before Eustace came in. So in some ways I think that makes his job a little bit more difficult because we were arguably doing the basics very poorly. So I don't know, he could be the Messiah, or he could just be someone who's going to come in and realise that he's not used to working with players who can't put two passes together. Who knows? I'm not getting too excited about it yet, but, you know, maybe I'm just Mr. Pessimistic at the moment.
Well, you make a good point, because I think Eustace would probably be shocked at maybe the levels of this squad, in my opinion, in terms of the difference between where he's been. Obviously, for Steve Round, obviously he's been out of work for a little bit, but assistant manager at Arsenal. I think there's a big difference between Arsenal and Derby County, of course. So they are dealing with different players, but hopefully they can find a way to get the very best out of this squad. James brings me on quite nicely, I guess, to the, as I said before, the title of this episode about what we can expect from Derby this weekend. Obviously, we'd have a full week under Eustace. He only got a session in before the QPR game. In your view, what do you expect to see from Derby on Saturday?
It sounds awful to say, but I don't see we're going to be too dissimilar to how we were under Paul Warne. In the sense of we're going to try and be hard to beat. That is very much part of his mantra. I mean, Blackburn have conceded 31 goals this season, and we're not going to see free-flowing attacking football, I don't think. I mean, if you look at Blackburn's record, in terms of goals scored, they've only scored 6 more than we have, and look at their league position relative to us, and they scored 4 of those against us. So, yeah, I can see us going to a 4 at the back, which I think we're quite, with the centre halves we've got, I think is probably wise, because if we stuck to a back 3 and one of them gets injured, we're in a lot of trouble. At least if we do play a back 4, we've got a centre half in reserve, and I think we will see us go through the middle of the park a lot more. Not least because I've got no idea how Caden Jackson is a professional footballer. But because I think we've been so poor out wide all season that it just hasn't worked, has it? The one thing that kind of worries me is when he took over Blackburn and they were in a similar position to what we're in. They had a Sammy Schmodix. We don't have a player you can look at and think, yeah, he could score today. We don't have it. I don't see where the next goal is coming from a set piece or open play. And I mean, probably the closest player we've got to a Sammy Schmodix in terms of raw technical ability is probably Kenzo Halmine. And again, that's just because it's raw technical ability. He doesn't know the English leagues very well. He's played 30 games this season in the Championship. He's not accustomed to the league. Sammy Schmodics was around 28 when John Eustace had him at Blackburn and he scored something ridiculous, like 30 goals that season. We don't have a dangerous player that teams are going to be like, he's a real threat. I don't see that in this squad of players, unfortunately, at the moment. Maybe under Eustace, that feeling might change. Only time will tell, I suppose, on that front. And we just need some new wingers, don't we? Because under Paul Warne, going out wide didn't work because we were so poor out there. So poor. You sign a target man in Salverson, but if you've not got the quality to put the ball in the box, what's the point in having a target man up there in the first place? Do you know what I mean? That's the be-all and end-all of it, isn't it? You've got to be able to put the ball in the box for somebody to get on the end of, and it just hasn't happened. I mean, he scored one goal, and who put the cross in? It wasn't a winger, it was Jerry Yates. So that kind of shows you just how poor we are out wide. And I would suggest, probably looking at kind of as a balance, we've probably got the worst wingers in the division. And I think a lot of Derby fans would probably agree with me on that.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to get a tune out of the players that he's got out there at the moment, because if he wants to play with wingers, you have to play a Mendes-Lang, a Harness, a Jackson, unless you can do something creative. Craig, is the result the most important thing, or is it a case of if we get a point, or I don't want to think about us losing, but even if we lost the game, but we saw something to be hopeful of, that's good enough? What's kind of your thoughts? Is it a case of it's must win and we need to just win by any means necessary, or are we going to be looking at it thinking, no, we actually want to see a different Derby County?
Two answers to that question. Because if we don't win, it's putting more pressure on the 12 games that are to come. So the next game, there's even more pressure to get a win. And then if you don't win that, there's even more pressure to get a win. So I want to say that Saturday is massively must win. And Millwall, like Singh is not an idiot. He will know that we will feel like we have to win. I think that's why Eustace will set us up to be hard to beat, because he said himself that the team is very delicate. If we get that we concede an early goal, I can't see us coming back to win from behind. It will rise if he dropped Kenzo. There were some pictures that the club circulated of training where I saw looked like Thompson was in the 6 and then Adams were in front of him. If Ozo is injured, I would not be surprised to see Thompson in the 6. I think we've forgotten that he is a good technical footballer who, working under Paul Warne, is the same as Max Bird, right? The ball is just going over your head all the time. I think we've forgotten that under Rooney and Rossignol, he was decent. When we went down under admin, Thompson had some brilliant games. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him. I don't know if I agree with your comment, James, on the worst wingers in the league, but I've not seen all the wingers in the league, But we're really harsh as a fan base on Marcus Harness. He's been playing in centre midfield all season. When has he ever played as a cam, ever, in his career, apart from becoming Derby? I think he'll play on the left again, and I think Mendes-Lang will play on the right. I think Mendes-Lang has scored this year because he has been shifted to accommodate Jackson. And he's been open and honest, saying that he doesn't like playing on the left, he likes to play on the right. So we might see a different performance from him. I'm not feeling confident, but I think we have to try and be positive, because otherwise we're just going to go down. We have to try and support the team because they're really, really delicate, and we can't jump on their backs and get down the road. We've got to be that 12th man that were there during the admin season. And for some of us, that's hard when we're frustrated. But I think what we have to do at the moment to give us every chance of staying up, because if we stay up, the foundations are in place for this club to really build what's going on behind the scenes. But I think going down will be a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why you had John Eustace calling on Derby fans to be there on Saturday. We're going to get on to the interview with Stephen Pearce, and he ended it in a similar way, saying that the fans need to be there, be the 12th man. And we know just how important that is. So hopefully that happens on Saturday, and we can suck the ball into the net in that first half or second half. We have got some preview ahead of the Millwall game, so I'm going to play that now from That Millwall Podcast.
Good evening, That Millwall Podcast for Rams Talk Podcast. Preview before our game this week. How's Millwall performed this season? We started off okay, letting a few goals at the beginning, but no, we've mellowed into it. We've had a change of manager. Under Neil Harris, obviously, we went 9 unbeaten, and everything started to sort of go south a bit. We've now changed. We've now got Alex Neil. We went 4 games unbeaten, and then obviously we beat Leeds in the FA Cup, and then we got spanked by Plymouth, back to a draw against West Brom. So, yeah, the season is okay. I think we'll be safe this season. I don't see any issues with that, to be honest. I think we'll probably be middle table. Maybe we'll go on a run, but I think probably middle table will be our remit for this season. What players are probably going to cause the most damage to you? Probably set pieces. It'll be, the Millwall man who's been there forever and a day, Jake Cooper. He's a man monster. And some of the new signings, Kamel, the Dutch lad, I think he's very technical. He could cause you some issues. And then obviously Kramer, the French lad, I think he's going to cause you some, issues. These are a good sort of unknown until we sign them. Tango's obviously solid. He's far too good for the championship, but we have him. So we will try and keep him as best we can. But I think he'll definitely be a Prem target or a promotion seeking championship club come the summer season as such for next season. That those teams thought they were going to do it and didn't potentially, but I think Prem bound unless we can do something to keep him for another season. I think by the time we get you, I think we'll probably have Coburn back, and I think we'll have a few of the other players back. Femi again is going to cause you problems. He's got pace and he don't mind running at you. So, yeah, I think there's probably 5 or 6 players what will cause you issues if you're not fully on it. So I think it'll be a good game, but hopefully we will just nick it. Any weaknesses in the Millwall team? I don't necessarily know if there's weaknesses. I think the players are good as long as their concentration's there. I think, if you get an early goal, it could put our heads down. And I think if there's any lack of failure of concentration, I think that's when we seem to let goals in. But we've not really apart from Plymouth, we've not really let many more than 1 goal a game in. So, I think it will probably be a close game, or it will probably be a draw, to be fair. But no, I don't think there's any one player that really any real weakness. I mean, we have a togetherness now under Alex Neil, and I think that's a difference, and that's a benefit going forward, to be honest. But I think we can take it to you. I think if there is a weakness, it's being able to score. We don't really have strikers who are prolific at the minute, but they are coming, so you never know. They might turn up on your game. Score prediction. I think I'm going to go 2-0 Millwall. And I'll probably go Jake Cooper, and probably our big sub. I think that way you can earn a few quid because Jake's always at least 9-1 or above to score at any time. So, yeah. And anything else you think our listeners will enjoy? I think you just know that Millwall's everyone's guilty pleasure, and we're coming to take the points back to Millwall. Come on, Millwall, up the Lions.
That's probably my favourite preview video. So thanks so much for that Millwall podcast. You ended that spectacularly. I mean, a lot of teams have got to be confident at the moment, Craig, playing against Derby. Obviously, that goes back probably to the run and Paul Warne. It's obviously going to be a bit different now under Eustace. But for me, this is an ideal game for John Eustace. It's not a Leeds at home. It's not Sunderland at home. It's a Millwall who at the moment are comfortably mid-table. They've won a few, they've lost a few, they've drawn a few, and that's why they are where they are. Do you agree? Is that a good first home game for Eustace?
Yeah, I think so. I think what they're gonna try and be horrible to play against as usual. They're gonna know that we're gonna be absolutely, hopefully, bang up for it, and we're gonna be viewing it as win games. So, they're gonna jump on any opportunity that they've got to frustrate us, frustrate the crowd, frustrate the players. But you're right, it was Leeds or Sheffield United or Sunderland, Burnley even, you're not going into the game as a fan confident and positive. You're going thinking, bloody hell, I'll be happy if we can get away with a 0-0 here. In some ways that puts the pressure on a little bit more. But at least we're not. I think that would be probably worse if we were playing a Plymouth or a Hull, right? Because the pressure would be massive from the fans, and the players will be putting it on themselves too. So yeah, I think good game. We're not going to stop, and hopefully, we can surprise them a little bit and 3 points. Pray to God, Jesus Christ.
It's crazy. It's crazy that we've not seen Derby win in so long. There were times, and this is going to sound absolutely crazy, James, but under Steve McLaren, you used to get to Pride Park. You knew you were going to win, and it was a case of by how many.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that winning games of football got boring at that point, but there was a bit of it of like, well, I just know we're going to get a result today. We can just do it. And I hope that John Eustace can experience that. Obviously, he might not have it this season, but in a season or two, you never know. James, no Cruz Allen or Jake Rooney with the under-21 squad today. Could suggest that they'll both be involved on Saturday. Do you think we should be using youngsters not just for depth, but also to give them a chance and see what they're made of, especially when we're talking about certain players being desperately out of form?
It's always a risk, isn't it? I mean, yes, perhaps they should be in and around the matchday squad. Certainly the likes of Cruz Allen, Noel McAndrew, the ones that have had a really good season at under 23 level. I mean, we saw a bit of Jake Rooney last season in League One before his unfortunate injury. He looked more than solid enough at that level. If he can come back from an injury of that magnitude and compete at a championship level, fair play to him, fantastic. But it is a risk given our current circumstances. If we were kind of where we were on Boxing Day and kind of floating around mid-table still, not in any real danger, you just chuck them in, don't you? Get them some match experience, get them some experience at this level. But that's not where we are. We are a team fighting and scrapping for every single point available to us. So is it the right kind of environment to bring those lads in? Maybe. We might have our hand forced. We don't know if we're going to get any more injuries, particularly in at centre half, central midfield, areas like that. We might not have much of a choice to play those players. But I certainly think in terms of being given an impact to make being given the opportunity rather to make impact off the bench. It can only do Cruz Allen, for example, the world of good if it's 0-0 at 80 minutes and we get an injury and he comes on and scores the winner on Saturday. All of a sudden, he feels like, yes, he can compete at this level and can drive Derby County's midfield a bit, that little bit further. Do you see what I mean? So there's a very delicate balance of risk and reward when it comes to academy products and players at this point of a season that we're like in the season that we're currently undergoing. But there is a place for them, even in our current circumstances, I believe.
Before we get on to reaction to the Stephen Pearce interview, just quickly, Craig and James, your score predictions for the Millwall game. Craig?
I am the most pessimistic Derby fan in the world, but I think we are going to win 1-0.
I'd take seeing a goal at Pride Park at this point because we haven't seen one since Boxing Day. So I'd take a 1-1 at this point. I agree with you. I'm also a very pessimistic Derby County, especially at this point. And I know a lot of people would agree. I did a poll on my Twitter and about if we stay up or go down, and I think 63% of people said we're going down. So, yeah.
I think that's the general feeling, isn't it? At the moment, we need something to get excited about, and hopefully that can be Saturday at lunchtime. I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory. I'm actually on a flight on Saturday, so I take off at 11, and I won't see the game. I won't know anything about the game. So, Derby County, if you want to ruin my holiday, feel free to lose on Saturday. But if you want to make it that much better, then yeah, just the 3 points, please. But Craig, we've left it 30 minutes to get on to that Stephen Pearce interview. Obviously, we saw it come out free on Rams TV, 28 minutes in all its glory, or was it 27? I'm not too sure. For me, it felt like a politician on Question Time, in all honesty. What I will say is the questions from Owen Bradley, whether they were scripted, whether they were seen beforehand, I think they were quite probing, in all honesty. So there's no kind of slant on that, because I actually think the questions were relatively probing, but it did feel a little bit like I said there, a politician just kind of sitting on a stage and giving the standard kind of answers. We know everyone's opinion on Stephen Pearce. He's obviously here through the dark times, and he will always be associated with that, whether he wants to or whether he doesn't want to. What were your feelings upon seeing that? Did you get through the whole 28 minutes, Craig? Or, what are your thoughts?
I got about 20 minutes in before I had to do the bedtime routine with my little one. I was surprised by some of the questions by Owen Bradley, actually. I really didn't expect some of them to be quite as probing as they were. I try and look at Pearce objectively a little bit, because I know 99% of the fan base hate the bloke and want him out of the club. I'll try and take a step back and analyse the situation a little bit, because he was working under a certain regime before, and you could say that as CEO he had some control over trying to veto what Mel Morris was doing, but none of us has ever been in a situation of a CEO. So how do we know how easy that is? If any of us have seen that TV show Succession, when what's his name, Logan Roy, is in charge of the whole thing in the background. If he's not the CEO, but he is, really hard to go against that. I do trust David Clowes. I think he's kept him on because he believes he's a good man. The problem is we're all going to always associate him with what happened before, and whatever happens, I don't think he's ever going to win the first round. He could go on and do an interview with Radio Derby, but he's just going to get hammered by all of us, because lots of the questions we will want answers to, he will probably say he's had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and not be able to answer any of them. So we would get even more frustrated from that. So this, I think, his way and the club's way of him coming out and trying to address some of those. And some of it, I think he has done quite well, but I don't really think we've learned anything new, have we? Everything that he said was kind of what we expected that he would say. But, you have to kind of, I think, give him some props and say, you know what, he didn't have to do that, because we're all criticising him now, right? So he's put himself out there, and while he's at the club, I just think we just got to get on with it and hope that he can turn it around.
Yeah, James, ultimately, David Clowes is the man who decides what happens at the club. And to be honest, I wouldn't want it any other way. We'll talk in a bit about investment and about how he wants it to be right for Derby County and for himself, which makes complete sense. So if David Clowes is backing Stephen Pearce, then for me, I've just got to get behind it. But it's quite interesting that, especially in that away end at Norwich, there were a few calls of Stephen Pearce, get out of our club, and then we see him appear. What was your kind of main takeaway from that 28 minutes? Is there one thing for you that kind of sticks out, that when you talked about it with friends, with family, that was the main talking point?
I think my main takeaway, kind of, you remove whatever you think of him as a human being and what he's been through at Derby County and all of that. You take all of that out of it, and kind of looking at it from quite an objective point of view. The thing that the biggest takeaway I took was when he kind of mentioned that this was a club transfer window rather than a Paul Warne head coach transfer window, which kind of then even more exasperates the idea that the Paul Warne sacking was a little bit odd in terms of timing. So the idea that Eustace was number one choice, it kind of almost feels disingenuous, because he's been allowed to take training, he's been allowed to prepare for Norwich, he's been allowed to do all of that and talk to these players that are coming in. And then he almost kind of, not in so many words, but he almost name drops the Louis Barry deal, in the sense that he went to Hull for £1.5 million. I think somebody mentioned this with our guys, and £1.5 million on an unproven Championship player on deadline day. But then we've gone and signed a £4 million centre half who's also unproven at Championship level. Yes, there's an argument to say that we've actually signed an asset rather than a lone player, and he's here for a little bit longer, and there is that. And he then goes on to kind of talk about wanting to make smart financial decisions. But then that kind of brings you back to the question: is a £1.5 million outlay for a striker who we know can score and can finish, because we've seen it, albeit not at this level, is that a massive outlay in terms of keeping the club in the division? Because surely the smarter financial decision would be to invest in staying in the division and allowing ourselves to build in seasons to come, rather than taking the risk and not signing a striker and going back down a division, back into League One, where I think we would struggle, because there are a lot of, I think last season, I think everyone was just worse than us rather than we were better, if that makes any sense. So I don't know, that kind of struck me as odd, kind of how he was on about smart financial decisions in that sense. And then we went and signed an 18-year-old midfielder who was also unproven at Championship level. And it just kind of struck me as a little bit odd. I'm
sorry to cut you off, James.
No, sorry.
Is that Louis Barry deal not happening because the club had a couple more deals in the pipeline that they expected to get done on deadline day?
Well, he
that
mentioned,
been reported by Percy, and that might be why that they pulled out of that, and they expected to get them done and they weren't. So maybe that's why.
Mention there were 4 deals deadline day wise that they expected to do with a mixture of loans and permanents, didn't they? But was it us that pulled out, or was it a sense, or did Louis Barry not fancy it because of the style of football we were playing at the time? He even mentioned that a lot of deals were already agreed and all that kind of thing. So it felt a little bit odd in terms of that kind of thing. And going back to what you said about not doing a radio interview and it only being through club channels, there's an air of disingenuousness about that, isn't there? It's not necessarily. There's an air of that. So I think my main takeaway was kind of around the signings and the way he discussed the transfer window was a little bit almost odd.
Yeah. Well, you can understand if there's financial restraints put on us or there's financial implications at the club, you can understand certain situations. But my feeling was in the summer, I felt we panicked. I think we bought in Trewewa, we bought in Harness that I just don't think are good signings in all honesty. And they didn't turn out to be good signings. Look, the jury's out on Harness. Hopefully Eustace can get something from him. But at the moment, I'm not too impressed. And then you look at this deadline day, and I know that January is a different beast because of where it is in the year and everyone's got different things to do. But again, it felt unprepared. It felt a bit rushed, and we ultimately didn't get what we needed. He's obviously talked, and I found it quite interesting about the data and the expertise in all aspects of the club. It will take a bit of time to see that. The academy is healing. It will take a bit of time for players to come through there. Hopefully, we've talked about Cruz Allen and Jake Rooney and other players tonight. Hopefully, we'll see them with the first team. This kind of stuff does take a bit of time. But for me, signing the right player and getting reinforcements in the door, I don't think that takes 2, 3, 4 transfer windows. I think that could have been done in the summer. And I think it could have been done in January. And I think we're all in a position where we've said it tonight. We're desperately out of form, especially in wide areas, and we've got nothing there. We've got no one to go and put out there. And then everyone's saying the minute the transfer window closes, we've had it for it feels like the last 10 years. Oh, we have to look at free agents then. Wouldn't it be so nice to get all of our business done and get the right players in? And then when that window shuts, we're not looking at, who's a free agent? Ryan Kent, Brandon Williams, to mention a couple. That is frustrating in my opinion. I've gone on a bit of a rant there, but yeah, it was certainly an interesting 28 minutes. I think there's a lot to take from it. There's definitely a clean slate here. They're obviously backing the manager. They've got their number one target, as Stephen Pearce said. So we've just got to get behind them. We really have. As we said earlier in the episode, we need to be that 12th man on Saturday. If you're debating whether to get a ticket, if you're in two minds, get there and make us that bit better, because you can really have an impact. And hopefully we see a good performance on Saturday that shows that we've got the ability to stay in this league. I feel like I shouldn't have the last word. Craig, do you want to add something else to that? I mean, I've gone off on a bit of a rant there, but
I think on a positive note, I don't think you get a manager who's sitting fifth in the league, Blackburn, to come to a club in the position that we are with the squad that we have if there's something going on behind the scenes that isn't right. I think whatever's going on behind the scenes at Derby, it must look like an impressive machine that's building in the right direction. We make all the right noises about culture and community and all that stuff. And I think that whether we stay up or go down, John Eustace thinks that there is a lot of potential here. And so I think that is the positive. And I think whatever's going on behind the scenes is going to set us in good stead for the future. So that would be my one positive to try and cling to the moment. Hopefully a win on Saturday will build on that too.
James, come on, some positivity. I know you're pessimistic, but give us just that little bit of positivity.
Well, give him his dues. One of the positives I took from the Stephen Pearce interview was when he kind of mentioned the Moneyball tactics that we've seen Brighton and Brentford employ. He said that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build our own, almost a Derby County model. And I think that's a bonus, because I think Moneyball is effective for some clubs. It's a risk. But I like the fact we're building our own way of playing, our own way of dealing with transfers, our own way of signing and recruitment and those kinds of aspects. I think it's better to innovate than copy. Fortune rewards the brave, favours the brave, doesn't it? So that's the positive I took from the interview, and it, like Craig says, 3 points can only build on that 100%.
Well, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do go rate us 5-star wherever you listen to us, whether that be on Spotify or YouTube. We will be back on Sunday, hopefully with lots of positive vibes, talking about 3 points, being out of the relegation zone and pushing on under John Eustace. We will see you then. It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Up the Rams.
Up the Rams.